Favorable situations are more dangerous than adversities. Profound teachings of Buddhism. Welcome back, everyone, to Mind Podcast. In favorable situations, do not become attached, and in adverse situations, do not develop resentment. In favorable conditions, maintain virtue. In adverse conditions, cultivate the mind. In our daily lives, we must practice self-discipline. When encountering favorable circumstances, do not give rise to excitement, and when facing adversities, do not fall into depression. This is the true practice. Encountering favorable situations should not cause excitement, and adversities should not lead to anger. Only then can your merits be preserved. In front of demonic obstacles, Shakyamuni Buddha demonstrated to us how to conquer them with the power of concentration and wisdom. Without concentration and wisdom, you will not be able to maintain your merits. If your mind constantly reacts and shifts according to external circumstances, then you are creating the cycle of samsara, karma, and rebirth, which will lead to suffering in future lives. Therefore, in our daily lives, we must train ourselves. Training is a form of cultivation. Previously, when our six senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, were exposed to the six sense objects, form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought, they were easily influenced by external situations. Seeing what we liked, we would become excited. Seeing what we disliked, we would give rise to aversion. This is incorrect and needs to be corrected. How do we correct it? Do not let favorable conditions create excitement, and do not let adverse conditions lead to resentment. This is called true practice. Practicing is not just about reciting sutras, chanting Buddha's name, or bowing to the Buddha every day. Those are just external forms. True practice must be genuinely useful and applicable in daily life. When facing all people, situations, and things, if you can stay calm and no longer be influenced by external circumstances, then you have true skill. If you are in a chanting hall, reciting the Buddha's name 10,000 times a day, but your mind is still affected by external conditions, then as the ancients said, it's like having a sore throat from excessive talking. It's all in vain. This means your practice is either non-existent or insincere. Venerable Master Chin Kung, favorable situations are more dangerous than adverse ones. In adversity, we have self-reflection. In comfort, we lack vigilance. In challenging situations, we tend to reflect and maintain a heightened state of alertness. However, in favorable circumstances, we often let our guard down. That is why our mistakes and downfalls in favorable situations can be significant, yet we might not even realize it until it's too late. This is why the ancients used to say that favorable conditions can lead to greater downfall, while adversities, although difficult, can sharpen our awareness and self-reflection. Venerable Master Chin Kung teaches that those who truly cultivate their minds possess a peaceful and impartial heart. Regardless of whether they are in favorable or adverse situations, whether they encounter good or bad circumstances, they can benefit from and make use of these conditions for their practice. The Venerable Master emphasizes that true practitioners, when faced with both favorable and adverse situations, good or bad circumstances, always remain in a state of self-reflection. However, for those who do not practice, they will feel troubled and distressed in adversity and overly satisfied in favorable conditions. Our minds change within a split second. 12 trillion thoughts arise and perish in just 1 second. It is this rapid fluctuation that makes it difficult for us to reflect and be aware. Therefore, the Venerable Master says that for those who truly practice, all situations, whether good or bad, favorable or adverse, are opportunities for cultivation. It means they are always in a state of self-reflection, observing whether they are being controlled by negative habits or not. The most dangerous thing is being trapped in the 5 desires: wealth, fame, food, sleep, and sensual pleasures. When life is difficult, we may strive to overcome, but when everything goes well and we get what we want, we cling to it, causing our spiritual path to regress. The Buddha taught us to generate the aspiration to learn and practice Buddhism to achieve the highest level of enlightenment, the unsurpassed Buddhahood. Not to seek blessings in heavenly or human realms, nor to become an arhat, a pratyeka Buddha, or a bodhisattva. As Pure Land practitioners, our goal is to be reborn in the Western Pure Land of ultimate bliss. Everything else is secondary and not worth discussing. The Venerable Master said that many practitioners fall into the trap of fame and wealth, a accumulating assets, but losing the way. Wealth does not only refer to money, but also to material possessions. The more material wealth one accumulates, the less pure the mind becomes. Many spiritual communities, in the beginning, have high spiritual aspirations when they lack fame and wealth. But once fame and wealth are acquired, their spiritual aspirations diminish. Venerable Master declines real estate offers and upholds true practice. The Venerable Master was offered numerous properties and luxurious villas, but he refused to accept them. Instead, he proposed, "Let me rent this house with a clear contract and agreement. If the tenant, Party B, does not practice according to the Dharma, Party A has the right to reclaim the house. Party B has the right to use it, but not to own it." We see many wealthy people around the world living extravagantly. One meal could cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Our blessings are nothing compared to theirs. Yet we often think that we are practicing well, and therefore deserve such blessings. However, a true practitioner chanting the Buddha's name should aspire for the ultimate blessing, to become the future spiritual leader of the Western Pure Land of ultimate bliss, not to accumulate a few properties. The Buddha once said, "In the future, I will pass this Dharma King's throne to you." When we've just started cultivating and acquired a small temple or spiritual center, we may mistakenly think we're practicing well, becoming complacent and satisfied. This indicates that we've already lost our spiritual aspiration. Just this morning, someone texted me asking, "Do you know of any truly pure spiritual centers?" I replied, "I don't know. I only know how to grow a beard, so I'm not sure which places practice well and which don't." We often judge that this place is good or that place is good, but they might have their own flaws and imperfections. That's the law of cause and effect, and we must bear it. Every condition we encounter is an opportunity for self-training. In adversity, we cultivate true patience, enduring every hardship. In favorable situations, we cultivate a pure and equal mind, free from attachment and defilement. When Shakyamuni Buddha was alive, he and his monastic community lived humbly, eating only one meal a day and sleeping under trees. When they were offered food, if they couldn't finish it, they would donate it to others, never keeping it for the next day. Even if they found a large tree that could provide ample shade and shelter from the rain, they would still move to a different spot the next day, avoiding attachment. The only possessions of the Buddha and his monastic community were 3 robes and a bowl. In normal weather, they wore 1 robe. When it was colder, they would wear 2, and in even colder weather, they would wear all 3. Venerable Master's teaching: favorable situations are more difficult to overcome than adversities. The Venerable Master taught that favorable conditions are much more dangerous than adversities. Adversities do not cause severe harm to people, but favorable conditions can lead to their downfall. On the battlefield, people do not lose their willpower, but in business, they often become discouraged and disheartened. The same principle applies in Buddhism. Adversities help to train us and keep us vigilant, but in favorable situations, people become deluded and attached. When everything goes according to their desires and expectations, they feel pleased and satisfied, which leads to a loss of their motivation and aspiration to improve. The Venerable Master pointed out that, since ancient times, countless practitioners have been eliminated by favorable conditions. When they were still facing difficulties, they were highly motivated. But once things started to go well, their drive diminished. Their desire to transcend the mundane world weakened, and they became attached to status, identity, and their spiritual centers. Attachment arises in many forms. The Buddha taught in the sutras, all attainments are achieved through patience. To attain success in any aspect of life, one must cultivate patience. Many practitioners ultimately fail and regress because they lack patience and endurance. As fame and wealth gradually increase, they become ensnared by worldly temptations and fall into the demon's net. Throughout his life, the Venerable Master was offered many material possessions, but he declined them all, avoiding any entanglements. He adhered to the principle of 3 things to avoid: not managing money, not managing affairs, and not managing people. Once, someone captured an image of the Dharma protectors in the Buddha Hall and showed it to the Venerable Master. He simply told them to tear it up and not to spread it. The ancients used to say, "The noble person completes the virtue of others." A noble person perfects others' virtues and sets an example in the world. At the highest level, they embody the qualities of a saint or Buddha: true sincerity, purity, equality, right understanding, and compassion. We ordinary beings are still full of desires: joy, anger, love, hatred, sorrow, and happiness. Some practitioners, after a few years, are offered a temple or spiritual center. They mistakenly think that they have attained some spiritual achievement, imagining that it is a reward from the Buddha. However, this thinking is flawed. True cultivation is not about gaining material offerings or recognition. It's about maintaining purity of mind and remaining free from attachments, regardless of favorable or adverse conditions. They are mistaken. If the Buddha were to do such things, it would lead sentient beings into delusion and downfall. The Buddha does not act in this way. If the Buddha does not interfere, Mara will. The Buddha bestows upon sentient beings boundless, unconditional love, compassion, without any prerequisites. On the contrary, Mara entices us with conditions, taking advantage of the merits we've cultivated. When things don't go as we wish, Mara demands repayment. It gives us one thing but takes back two, leaving us in a miserable state. This is not my opinion, but the teaching of the Venerable Master when he explained the Infinite Life Sutra. How does Mara take it back? It could be through illnesses, disruptions caused by family members, selling houses, or the collapse of homes. That is why, when we practice, our minds must remain pure and distant from our habitual tendencies and afflictions. That is the true meaning of righteousness. Selfishness and self-benefit must be subdued to their lowest level. Craving for fame and fortune must also be reduced to the minimum. The 5 desires and the 6 sense objects must be conquered to their lowest level. Greed, anger, ignorance, and pride must be diminished as much as possible. Only then can we claim to have true skill in our cultivation. In the path of spiritual practice, the lowest attainment is the stage of Sotapanna, stream enterer, which requires complete selflessness to be realized. To be reborn in the Pure Land, we must not have any remaining attachments in our minds. The Venerable Master said that countless practitioners have been eliminated by favorable conditions. We must practice patience in all circumstances. In favorable conditions, do not give rise to greed. In adverse situations, do not give rise to anger. Even in the face of adversities, maintain a tranquil and equal mind. This is true patience. The patriarchs have taught us, even if the heavenly king Indra himself comes down and says, "Don't seek rebirth in the Pure Land. I'll give you half of my heavenly realm instead," we should not be moved or tempted. To possess this state of mind is to have the mindset of someone who is truly ready for rebirth in the Pure Land. Often, when we practice and receive a donation of a temple or building, we may mistakenly think it's a blessing bestowed by Amitabha Buddha. In reality, it's often a trap set by Mara. When we receive such blessings and become subjects of Mara, we feel a sense of pride and satisfaction. The Venerable Master said, "If a small piece of gold doesn't tempt you, what about a larger piece? Will it move your heart?" Mara is very clever. It never offers more than what would stir your heart. It gives only just enough to move you, without excess. Thus, when we encounter favorable conditions and attain material benefits, we must always be vigilant. Do not mistake them for the Buddha's gifts, as they could very well be Mara's traps designed to ensnare our minds and obstruct our spiritual progress. True cultivation lies in remaining unshaken by both favorable and adverse conditions, maintaining a pure and tranquil mind at all times. Unmoved by wealth and material gains, true detachment and spiritual practice. If we remain unmoved by 5 million, then what about 50 million, 500 million, 5 billion, or even 5 trillion? Would our minds still remain unaffected? The Venerable Master lived by the principle of non-attachment. He didn't manage affairs, didn't handle money, and didn't control others. To this day, he still resides in houses temporarily offered by others. Meanwhile, we often mistakenly consider this temple or that spiritual center as our own. If we hold on to such attachments, when the time comes for us to leave this world, we will be filled with anxiety and regret. Could it be that the Buddha intends for us to experience this turmoil? The Venerable Master emphasized that favorable situations cause severe elimination of practitioners. while adversities awaken them, encouraging self-reflection and effort. Favorable circumstances lead people to indulge and lose their aspiration to transcend the world. They may want to live longer to chant the Buddha's name, which might sound reasonable, but in reality, they have become attached to worldly life. True practitioners who are genuinely enlightened and sincerely chant the Buddha's name wish for early rebirth in the Pure Land. Every day earlier is a better day because this world, filled with the 5 poisons of greed, anger, ignorance, pride, and doubt, pollutes us. Pollution leads to downfall. Even if what I'm saying reduces the number of practitioners, I still must remind everyone of this. In ancient times, lay practitioner Banlong Uan set an example of detachment. He loaded all his possessions onto a boat and drilled a hole in it, allowing the boat and everything on it to sink into the river. After that, his family led a simple life, weaving straw sandals to sell and earn a living. People asked him, "If you didn't need those things, why didn't you give them to others? Why didn't you do good deeds?" He replied, "Doing good deeds is not as good as doing nothing if doing good leads to inner turmoil and a disturbed mind." He wanted to break the worldly attachments that people have, as they tend to become attached even to doing good deeds. When people do good deeds but get caught up in them, it's better not to do them at all. He lived with freedom and was able to choose the time of his rebirth in the Pure Land at will. There is also the story of a man who gave up his gold shop to become a monk. One day during lunch, he chose the biggest and best-looking banana to eat. After finishing it and returning to his room, he suddenly realized that he still had a greedy mind. The Buddha does not teach us to abandon our homes or possessions, but to abandon our greed. As long as greed remains in our hearts, we will continue to experience samsara and downfall in accordance with our karma. The Buddha taught us to cultivate morality, concentration, and wisdom, to eradicate greed, anger, and ignorance. This is the path to liberation. The Buddha did not teach us to merely change the objects of our greed, hatred, and ignorance. Instead, he taught us to completely eradicate the very roots of greed, hatred, and ignorance from our minds. Venerable Master spent his entire life demonstrating this principle through his own actions as an example for us to follow. He once said, "If I were to build a temple, no one could imagine how grand it would be." People have offered the Venerable Master many real estate properties, yet he refused them all. As practitioners, if we become tools for others to seek profit or fame, can we truly escape the law of cause and effect? Today's lesson from the Venerable Master is a warning. Favorable situations can eliminate practitioners and lead many into downfall. Therefore, we must practice patience in both adversity and prosperity. In adversity, we practice patience to overcome difficulties. In prosperity, we also need patience. If something is beneficial to sentient beings, we should accept it to bring them benefits. But if it only benefits ourselves, then accepting it will lead to our own downfall. There was once someone who stayed at my house for 3 days. On the first day, they offered to give me a refrigerator. On the second day, they offered to build me a fence. I declined both offers. Patience here is not just about enduring adversity, but also about maintaining composure and mindfulness in favorable conditions. Once, someone persistently invited me to stay in an extremely luxurious villa. I did not accept their invitation. Instead, I went home, spread out a mat, and lay down on the floor. Since then, they have stopped contacting me, but I hold no grievances against them. The Venerable Master said that today's society is filled with overwhelming temptations of fame, wealth, and the desires of the 5 senses and 6 sense objects. Very few people can resist the allure of these temptations. Therefore, we must be aware that the harm caused by favorable situations is far greater than the harm caused by adversities. When faced with adversity, we might give rise to anger, but we can easily recognize it because the consequences, such as a tight chest or feeling upset, are immediate and apparent. We know that such anger is harmful. However, in favorable situations when we develop greed and delusion, we often lack any sense of caution. Because of this lack of vigilance, we fall into downfall unknowingly. If there is anyone in this world who can remain non-attached, not managing people, affairs, or money, then even if that person is not a Buddha or Bodhisattva, they are still worthy of our deepest respect. For over 40, even 50 years, the Venerable Master never handled money and remained uninvolved in worldly affairs. He lived his entire life in simplicity, free from the influence of wealth and material desires. This is an example of true spiritual practice, an example for all of us to emulate. People may not believe this, but it is the truth. They even go as far as slandering and criticizing the Venerable Master. Yet every word of the Master's teachings is profoundly insightful. He led by example and embodied the principles he taught. He knew how dangerous favorable conditions could be, and thus, at the age of 36, he began practicing the 3 things not to manage, according to Master Yin Guang's teachings. Do not manage money, do not manage affairs, and do not manage people. The Venerable Master often said, accumulating wealth destroys the path of cultivation. If you hoard material possessions, where will your spiritual aspiration be? He shared these lessons wholeheartedly, not just speaking to guide us, but demonstrating them in his own life. He lived these principles, showing us the way. People should not misunderstand. Life is a continuous chain of lessons for each of us to reflect upon. According to the Buddha, to find peace in life, we must repay all of our karmic debts. Through stories of Buddhism like the one below, we hope to awaken deeper layers of conscience within each of us and help us understand the wondrous teachings of the Dharma, the story of karma and relationships. Once upon a time, there was a young scholar named Thu Sing who had made a vow to marry his beloved. However, the girl ended up marrying someone else, leaving the young scholar heartbroken and seriously ill. One day, a traveler passing by heard the story of the young man and gave him a mirror. In the mirror, the scholar saw the image of a woman's body, naked and lifeless, washed up on a beach. The first person who passed by her merely glanced at her and walked away. The second person took off his coat and covered her body. The third person, upon seeing her, dug a grave and carefully buried her. The traveler explained to the young man that the unfortunate woman in the mirror was, in fact, his lover from a past life. He then revealed to the scholar, "You were the second person who passed by and covered her body. In this life, she came to meet and love you, simply to repay that debt of kindness. However, the person she truly owed the greatest debt to was the one who carefully buried and built a grave for her. This person is now her husband." Hearing this, the young scholar suddenly became enlightened and understood the nature of karma and relationships. There was once a single woman who had just moved into a new house. She soon realized that her new neighbors were a struggling family consisting of a single mother and her 2 children. One evening, when the power went out, she lit a candle to illuminate her home. A little while later, she heard a knock on the door. When she opened it, she saw one of the children from next door. The child politely asked, "Hello, Auntie, may I ask if you have any candles?" The woman thought to herself, "Is this family so poor that they don't even have a single candle? It's probably best not to give them one, or they might start relying on me." With this thought, she responded, "No, I don't have any." As she was about to close the door, the child smiled brightly and said, "It's okay, Auntie. My mom was worried that you live alone and might not have any candles, so she sent me over to give you 2 of ours." At that moment, the woman felt a wave of emotions, touched and regretful. She hugged the child tightly, and tears welled up in her eyes. Reflection: what do you feel after reading this story? Sometimes a person's maturity is not determined by their age, but by their kindness and compassion. It's a reminder to look beyond assumptions and be open-hearted. Buddhist story: the unexpected kindness. One early spring night, while everyone was sound asleep, an elderly couple arrived at a hotel looking for a place to stay. Unfortunately, all the rooms were booked. The receptionist, not wanting to send the couple away in the middle of the night, decided to show them to a small room. "This is not the best room we have, but at least it will save you from searching for a place to stay at this hour," he said. The couple saw that the room was clean and tidy and decided to stay the night. The next morning, when they were checking out, the couple offered to pay for the room. But the receptionist replied, "There's no need to pay. That was actually my own room. I wish you both a wonderful trip." It turned out that the receptionist had given up his own room for the elderly couple and spent the night sleeping at the reception desk. Reflection: acts of kindness, no matter how small or unnoticed, can leave a lasting impact on those who receive them. The selflessness and thoughtfulness of the receptionist showed true compassion, a quality often emphasized in Buddhist teachings. These stories remind us that even in seemingly ordinary situations, we can always choose to act with love and kindness toward others. The elderly couple was deeply touched by the young man's gesture. "Young man, you are truly the best hotel employee we've ever met. You will surely be rewarded for your kindness," they said. The young man smiled, escorted them to the door, and soon forgot about the incident. One beautiful day, he unexpectedly received a letter along with a ticket to New York. Following the instructions in the letter, he embarked on his trip and found himself standing before a grand mansion. To his surprise, it was the same elderly couple who greeted him at the door. It turned out that the gentleman was a billionaire. He gifted the young man a hotel and entrusted him with managing it. This is the law of cause and effect in life, karma. In reality, karma is something we create and hold within our own hands. When we have not yet determined the grand purpose of our lives, let us approach everything with an open heart. Life is full of experiences. Sometimes we'll find ourselves laughing joyfully, and other times we'll shed tears of sorrow. Along life's journey, success will bring us joy, while failures will provide us with valuable lessons and awakenings. Through these stories of Buddhism, one truth becomes evident. True wealth in life stems from a selfless heart, and the goodness of life comes from a simple heart free from selfishness. As we walk through life, it's not about possessing something noble or grand. It's enough to simply act from a sincere heart. If you want to experience happiness and joy, begin by bringing happiness to others. Soon, you will find that your own heart becomes filled with happiness, and your life will feel much more meaningful.